A witch, a smile, and one missing heartbeat. Welcome to Marple Mysteries. I am your host, Harrington. Drop your city below. I read every comment. Wolfe steps into the spell. If you know Nero Wolfe, as I do, you know that the quickest way to ruin a morning is to let someone unexpected through the front door. I've seen him survive telegrams, blackmail, and orchids blooming out of season, but nothing frays his nerves like an uninvited visitor before beer o'clock. That Tuesday was one of those smooth, unblemished days when the brownstone hummed like a well-fed cat. Wolfe was upstairs communing with his orchids, and I was downstairs communing with a crossword puzzle that had more character than most of our clients. Fritz was in the kitchen, performing his usual morning miracle with eggs and truffles, when the doorbell broke the peace. I got up, not because I wanted to, but because I'm the one paid to open the door in this outfit. The woman on the stoop was worth a look. Tall, maybe early 30s, wearing a yellow suit that managed to look both expensive and wrong for her complexion. Her mouth curved in a smile that didn't reach her eyes. A kind of poised mischief that made you think she knew something you didn't and wasn't planning to share it anytime soon. "Mr. Wolfe?" she asked. "He exists," I said. "Whether he's available is another story. You've got business or admiration?" "Business," she said. "But if you insist, perhaps a touch of admiration too." That earned her a seat in the office. I led her in, offered the red chair, and buzzed the plant rooms. Wolfe took his time, as he always does, because hurrying would be an admission that someone else's needs mattered more than his orchids. When he came down, he filled the doorway like a man entering his own legend. You could almost hear the house straighten up in its chair. Wolfe's eyes drifted to the woman, took in the yellow suit, the gloved hands, the poised smile. He nodded once and sat. "Your name, madam?" "Celeste Rowan." "Occupation?" She tilted her head. "I write books about people who don't exist, Mr. Wolfe." "Fiction." "That explains the color," I said. Wolfe didn't look at me, which meant I was allowed to continue existing. Celeste smiled again, the same smile that didn't match her eyes. "I've come because someone has taken something from me. Not money, not jewels. Something else." Wolfe shut his eyes briefly, like a man trying to postpone indigestion. "Miss Rowan, if you have lost your patience, your youth, or your muse, I recommend self-reflection, not my professional intervention." "None of those," she said softly. "What was taken is my story, my next novel, the entire manuscript." That got Wolfe's eyes open again. "I sent it to my editor last month," she continued. "Only a few trusted people had seen it. Yesterday, a publisher I've never dealt with sent me a letter, congratulating me on my forthcoming release under another name." "Preposterous," Wolfe said. "Forgery, plagiarism, or both. The police—" "No," she interrupted. "The police will take weeks. I need discretion, and I was told you don't take cases like this unless you want to." That last part hung in the air like cigar smoke. Wolfe didn't answer. His lips pressed together. His fingers made a steeple. "Who told you that?" I asked. "A woman named Theodora Kent," she said. "She used to be your client." That was true enough. Theodora had been here 2 years back on a matter involving a missing will and an unmissable husband. Wolfe had solved it before lunch and refused the man's handshake afterward. Wolfe grunted. "Your manuscript," he said finally. "You have a copy?" "I have drafts, notes, but the final version, gone. And the person publishing it knows things only the real author could know. Personal details, private ones." Wolfe's eyes flicked toward me. "Archie, record her particulars, address, acquaintances, correspondence, then obtain this letter she received." "Sure," I said. "And after that, should I also fetch her lost imagination in case it's hiding with the manuscript?" Celeste laughed lightly. "You're very protective of your employer, Mr. Goodwin." I smiled back. Somebody has to keep him from wasting his genius. Wolfe ignored both of us. Miss Rowan, he said, I am sedentary, irascible, and overpriced. Why should I trouble myself with this affair? Celeste leaned forward, her yellow sleeve catching a slant of morning sun. Because, she said, whoever took my story knew enough about you to make you part of it. That pulled a full inch of silence out of Wolfe. Even the orchids upstairs seemed to pause their breathing. You're in the book, Mr. Wolfe, she added. So is Archie. Fictionalized, yes, but unmistakably you. I looked at Wolfe. He looked at her. The air in the room got a little heavier, like a warning. Archie, he said in that tone that means no argument, see Miss Rowan out. Then bring me beer. We shall consider this absurdity. She rose, still smiling that sly, knowing smile, the one that seemed to promise more trouble than truth. And that, ladies and gentlemen, was how the witch's smile entered the brownstone. I took her to the door and let the latch kiss behind her with just enough tenderness to be polite, then went back to the office with a bottle for Wolfe. He accepted it, tried to pretend the glass wasn't cold in his hand, and didn't say a word until he'd swallowed twice and let gravity do the rest. She left a vapor, he said finally. Yellow, I said. And trouble. He flexed the corners of his mouth. You are a poet in the time of plenitude, Archie. The letter, get it, and return with a full list of those who saw her manuscript. If she balks at precision, you may inform her that I insist on a ledger, not a watercolor. Does this mean we've taken the case? It means the brownstone has been mentioned in print without my leave. He shifted in the chair, a major event. I will not have that. I called Celeste and told her to bring the letter and her list. She said she'd come back within the hour. That was swifter than most deadbeats and 3 editors I've known. I used the interval to freshen the notepad and annoy Fritz by filching a sliver of his cheese tart. He shooed me the way a monk might shoo a goat from the scriptures. When the bell rang again, I expected yellow. I got it, but with garnish. Celeste had returned with a man who introduced himself before I asked, in the tone of a person used to getting the last word. Boris Quill, he said, Ms. Rowan's agent. His suit had the kind of thread count that dreams of multiplying, and his tie was a sober concession to his name. Celeste's smile was unchanged. It hovered like a secret she was too proud to keep but too smart to share. She handed me a cream envelope and a typed sheet clipped to a carbon copy. I got them inside without exposing them to Fritz's disapproval or the Lower East Side's air. Wolfe already had his hand out. I put the papers there and stood by for fireworks, or at least a small spark. The letter, on heavy stock with a faint watermark of a lion in a loop, congratulated M. Vale for her forthcoming title, The Witch's Smile, and welcomed the author to Graylian Press's selective catalogue. It mentioned editorial notes, in keeping with your unique cadence, and a publication date 6 months out, with a marketing plan that promised a whisper campaign involving secret identities. There was a paragraph in which the sender warmed her hands over personal details, an anecdote about a glass paperweight from Celeste's childhood, and a repeated phrase about the house that keeps its keys. Those were not items a pirate guesses. Those are things a thief filches from the drawer. Wolfe's face did what it always does when something truly misbehaves. Stopped being a face and became a wall. He turned to the carbon copy, which had a title page, The Witch's Smile by Celeste Rowan, and a working epigraph. A second sheet held a paragraph of text with pencil corrections in the margin, a change from doorbell to bell, and a note, tight and neat, that read, He hates plurals, watch for it. The pencil was a sharp 2B. The handwriting had a steeple to the T's and a smug comma. Graylian Press, Wolfe said. A small firm? Boris Quill cleared his throat with the relish of a man about to square his shoulders. Small but ambitious. They've made noise lately by poaching talent with generous advances and a very modern swagger. I've never sent them anything. Who sent this? Wolfe tapped the signature. J.E. Parrish, editorial director. Celeste shifted. I've never met Parrish. I know of Graelian from parties. People talk. People always do, Wolfe said. He passed the carbon to me and the cream envelope back to her, then turned his eyes to Quill the way a cat might look at a vase it hasn't decided to knock over. Mr. Quill, enumerate everyone who could have read Miss Rowan's final manuscript. Quill spread his hands. I'm her agent. I saw an earlier draft. Not final. Her editor at her current publisher, Rita Latham. A sensitivity reader, named Mira Chen. A private writing group, 2 members, Dane Harrow and Lina Bott. And, if we're being thorough, the copy shop where she had it printed. I've met men who could list their sins less smoothly. Quill ran through the names like he was counting cufflinks. Celeste's eyes didn't leave Wolfe's face. Her smile sat there and waited. And no one else? Wolfe asked. My assistant, Celeste said. He formatted the final. His name is Jonah. He's part-time. Wolfe closed his eyes. You brought more people than drafts, Miss Rowan. I brought the world, she said. That's what a book is. Bah. He opened his eyes again. Mr. Quill, your interest is fiduciary. Are you here to caution or to collect? Quill's mouth twitched. To protect my client, and my percentage, if we're being vulgar. We are. Wolfe shifted again. Graelion's letter, the phrasing about cadence and the prattle about secrecy, suggest a juvenile vanity. But the remark about plurals indicates a reader who has studied my habits. That is not juvenile. Celeste's smile hitched a fraction. Whoever it is wanted you to notice. I did, Wolfe said. Archie, take down the names precisely. Addresses, phone numbers, and employers. I had most of it before he finished the sentence. Celeste supplied the rest. Her voice didn't wobble, but the edge of the letter did, just enough for me to notice when she handed it back for a second look. Wolfe took his time with the envelope. He ran a thumb along the inside crease and grunted. There's a particle of saffron, he said. From the kitchen? I asked. My kitchen does not drop saffron in envelopes, he said coldly. That is not how order works. The thread adhered to the glue. It arrived that way. Quill leaned in. Saffron, as in cooking. As in ostentation, Wolfe said. Graelion stationery, a lion in a loop, saffron in a seam. They intend to be noticed. Fritz would never forgive saffron waste. I made a note to soak the envelope later if needed. Wolfe set it aside like a judge sets aside a confession. Useful, distasteful, and not the whole story. You may tell your editor, Miss Rowan, that she and her firm are to be assembled here tomorrow evening at 6:30, along with Mr. Quill, the assistant, and the writing group. I will not chase them. Celeste's smile stayed where it was, but traded a degree of shine for grit. You think they'll come? They always come, Wolfe said. Curiosity is more tyrannical than summons. The doorbell rang again as if to applaud him. This time it wasn't yellow. A messenger in grey held out a flat parcel addressed to Mr. Nero Wolfe in that same neat hand with steepled T's. I signed and brought it in. Wolfe didn't touch it. He nodded at me. I slit the brown paper cleanly. Inside was a single item, a spiral-bound notebook, brand new, its first page blank except for one sentence written across the top margin. Do keep up, it said. I've written your part beautifully. Celeste's smile didn't change, but something behind it did, like a light moving in another room. Wolfe finally leaned forward, a quarter of an inch, and breathed in as if scenting the page for saffron or sin. Archie, he said, very calm. Call Saul Panzer. Inform him to begin at Graelion Press, and then at Mr. Quill's office. Quietly, he looked at Celeste. Your witch smiles because she thinks she has written the ending. We will persuade her she is not. Saul arrived at 7 that evening, trim as a razor and twice as useful. Wolfe, who had spent the afternoon in a mood best described as storm warning, allowed him in with a curt nod and no greeting, which in our household is affection bordering on intimacy. I'd already given Saul the broad strokes over the phone, and he came armed with notes that looked more like scripture than surveillance. Each line spare, deliberate, without ornament. He had visited Graylian Press that afternoon under the guise of a writer looking for a publisher willing to take a bold contemporary voice. The receptionist had a mouthful of gum and an attitude to match. The editor's suite was glass-walled and furnished with ambition. He'd seen the name J.E. Parrish on the door, but the person inside was not in. According to the staff, Parrish was often remote, which in publishing language can mean anything from reclusive genius to an alias. Saul also dropped by Quill's agency, where he observed that the assistant, Jonah, left early carrying a tube-shaped parcel and a notebook. A match to our spiral-bound gift I didn't have to suggest aloud. Wolfe listened without interruption, his eyes half closed, fingers steepled. The only sign he was awake was the small movement of his right thumb, tapping a rhythm I'd learned to translate as continue. When Saul finished, Wolfe's eyes opened like shutters. "Archie, fetch the notebook." I put it on the desk. Wolfe studied the sentence on the first page again, as if it might have learned something since morning. "Do keep up. I've written your part beautifully." He turned the page with a care that would have impressed a librarian and frowned when the next leaf was blank, and the next until halfway through where a faint indentation showed where someone had pressed hard with a pencil, but then torn the page out. He leaned back, closed the cover, and addressed Saul. "You will tomorrow locate Miss Chen and the other 2 members of this writing group. Speak to them, discreetly. Determine if any of them has ties to Graylion." Saul nodded once, pocketed his notes, and left without unnecessary sound. That's why Saul remains employed. When he was gone, Wolfe poured himself beer, tilted his head toward me, and said, "Observe, Archie, that this miscreant is not merely bold. He is cultivating intimacy. He wishes to involve me in his performance." "He's getting it," I said. "Front row seats, aisle center." "Phooey. I will not be bait. I will extract the hook. But first, order. Order must be restored." That was the end of his sermon. He dismissed me with a look and vanished upstairs to commune with orchids, leaving me with the notebook, the lingering scent of saffron, and the sense that tomorrow's 6:30 gathering would make our office feel like Times Square at midnight. The next morning started with Fritz muttering about footprints. "In the hall, Archie. 2 sets, one small, one large, with dust not ours." He looked at me as if I were personally trafficking in soil. The locks were fine, windows shut, no sign of forced entry. Still, someone had paid us a visit. I checked the office. The notebook remained on Wolfe's desk, but it was not quite where I'd left it. I could swear it had shifted half an inch toward his globe stand. Maybe my imagination had clocked in early, but Wolfe's later inspection agreed. Someone entered. Nothing stolen. Merely inspected. Insolent. He summoned me, Fritz, and then Lon Cohen from the Gazette by phone, just to fish for gossip about Graylion. Lon's newsroom memory was encyclopedic and somewhat soiled. "Graylion," he said. "They're the darlings of the self-serious crowd. Started by a hedge fund dropout named Parrish. Jeremy something, big talker about intellectual property disruption, means stealing stories and calling it innovation." Wolfe grunted. The vulgarity of modern enterprise. By noon we had the pieces laid out like an unfinished meal. Celeste's stolen novel, a publisher with a taste for theft, a messenger with a notebook designed to tease, and footprints in our own hall. The afternoon's mail brought a note, unsigned on yellow paper that smelled faintly of oranges. "Cancel your gathering. The witch does not repeat herself. That one got a small, controlled explosion. Wolfe set the note on his desk, stared at it, and spoke so evenly I almost missed the edge in his tone. She, or he, presumes to dictate terms. "You going to cancel?" I asked. "Archie," he said, "bring up the phone. Confirm the attendance of each guest. Make no mention of threats. We proceed precisely as planned." So I did. Celeste sounded tense but eager. Quill tried to add a condition about security. Rita Latham agreed coolly, claiming she was curious. The two group members, Harrow and Bott, both confirmed with voices that carried different kinds of nerves. One brittle, one smooth. Jonah didn't answer, but an hour later he called back, voice muffled and short of breath. "I'll be there," he said, and hung up. At 5 o'clock, Wolfe descended for his pre-dinner beer, the picture of serenity except for the tilt of his head, a millimeter too far to the left, which I knew meant calculation. "They will come," he said, "though one of them may bring an offering. Gun, bomb, or confession. Something subtler. Vanity, perhaps. The weapon of amateurs." At 6:20, the bell began earning overtime. Fritz lined up trays of sandwiches for after the Inquisition, though if Wolfe's mood was any guide, few of us would have the appetite. Celeste arrived first, pale but controlled. Quill followed, smelling of the city and irritation. Then the editor, Rita Latham, precise, sleek, the kind of woman who would edit a conversation if she could. The writing group arrived together, casting side glances at each other as though both suspected the other of plagiarism and maybe murder. Jonah came last, eyes red-rimmed, carrying a folder clutched too tightly. I ushered them into the office. Wolfe didn't rise, he never does, but inclined his head like a sovereign acknowledging the existence of lesser kingdoms. The air thickened with perfume, ink, and apprehension. "Thank you for coming," he said. "We have been written into a story without consent. I intend to edit." No one answered. Celeste's yellow sleeve brushed the armrest. Jonah's folder trembled in his grip. Wolfe's eyes moved from face to face, a slow, deliberate orbit. "Before we proceed," he said, "one of you entered this house last night. I will learn which. And I will learn who among you writes with a pencil that steeples its T's and despises plurals." The silence that followed had a pulse. You could feel the witch's smile in the room, even if no one wore it. Wolfe didn't need to raise his voice. The weight of his words did the job for him. Every eye in the room went still except for Jonah's. His kept darting, jittering, like he was counting exits in his head. Celeste sat with her hands folded, the poise of a woman determined to appear unshaken. Quill leaned back in the red chair, the kind of lean that says, "I'm above this," and never convinces anyone. Rita Latham was all edges, eyes sharp, shoulders squared, mouth pressed thin. Harrow and Bott looked as though they'd taken turns rehearsing sincerity. Wolfe's gaze made its circuit again, slow as a pendulum. "I will not belabor etiquette," he said. "Miss Rowan's work has been appropriated. Among you, one or more facilitated that appropriation. I require the truth. Whether I extract it with your cooperation or in your absence depends on your disposition toward candor. You could have bottled the silence and sold it as tension concentrate." Wolfe turned slightly toward me. "Archie, record." "Already am." "Good. Now, Miss Rowan, recite the sequence of your manuscript's journey from completion to disappearance." Celeste straightened, and her voice was calm enough to fool a casual ear. "I finished it 6 weeks ago. I sent the file to Jonah for formatting. He printed 2 hard copies, one for me, one for my editor, Rita. Then I sent the file by email to my publisher. The only people with access were those in this room. Not counting the intruder," I added. "Not counting whoever that was," she agreed. giving me a quick glance, wary but grateful. Wolfe inclined his head toward Jonah. You printed it. Did you retain a copy? Jonah looked about as comfortable as a cat in a shower. No, sir. I just printed it and deleted the file. I swear. I used the office printer at Quill's agency. The machine doesn't keep data. Quill made a disapproving noise. Jonah's loyal, if not brilliant, but Graylian has deep pockets. They could have bought information. Rita turned her head, eyes narrowing. You're suggesting bribery. Please, this is a publishing feud, not espionage. You underestimate ambition, Wolfe said. In any trade where reputation outweighs truth, ambition is a form of larceny. Rita's lips thinned further, but she said nothing. Miss Bott, Wolfe went on, your critique group. Did Miss Rowan read excerpts? She nodded, blonde hair bobbing neatly. Just the opening chapter. We discussed structure, tone, nothing that would reveal her personal details. Harrow spoke next, eager to insert himself. It's a good story, he said too quickly. Strong hook, clever rhythm, but anyone could imitate that style if they wanted. I mean, it's not hard to copy a voice. Celeste's eyes flashed. It's my life they copied, not my style. Indeed, Wolfe murmured. And imitation of life requires knowledge. You, Mr. Harrow, how well do you know Miss Rowan? Harrow squirmed. Casually. We've been in the same workshops for years. More than casually, Bott said, low but clear. He asked her out twice. Harrow's ears went red. Irrelevant. Wolfe closed his eyes, a gesture that meant the opposite of disinterest. To you, perhaps. To me, it delineates motive. He turned his attention to Rita. Madame, you edited the manuscript. Did you store it electronically? Yes, she said evenly. On my office computer, protected by password. Yet your firm was not the one to announce its publication. No. She folded her hands, the picture of composure. But I did receive an inquiry from someone at Graylian last week, asking if I'd released rights to them. I hadn't. Name. An assistant, claimed to be on Parrish's behalf. Male voice. No surname, offered. Did you report it? I was going to. You were going to, Wolfe echoed. But you preferred to see where it led. Human curiosity is a universal defect. Her nostrils flared, but she held her posture. Wolfe could needle a saint into confession with that tone. At that moment, the office clock clicked audibly, the kind of sound that marks the turn in an interrogation. Wolfe shifted his bulk, the chair creaking softly. One of you, he said, visited this house last night. Nothing stolen. A reconnaissance, perhaps. I will have the name. Jonah's breathing sped up again. Quill noticed, frowned. Celeste's gaze moved to him too, then froze on his hand. What happened to your finger? She asked. Jonah looked down, startled. His left index was wrapped in a small adhesive strip, the kind you forget to remove after a paper cut. Printer jam, he muttered. Wolfe's eyes opened, sharp, bright, predatory. A paper cut? Yes, sir. From a spiral notebook? Jonah blinked. What? I saw Wolfe's shoulders settle, the sign he had his scent. Mr. Goodwin, he said, bring the notebook. I did. Wolfe opened it to the blank pages and slid it across the desk toward Jonah. If you please, hold this as you would a manuscript. Jonah hesitated, then took it. Wolfe's gaze didn't move. The cut on your finger is consistent with a wire edge, not a flat sheet. The particle of saffron was adhesive residue from this notebook. It was handled after the envelope was sealed. Jonah froze. For a second, no one breathed. Then he said, too fast, That doesn't mean I... Indeed it does not, Wolfe interrupted. But it means you received it, and that whoever sent it expected you to deliver it here. You failed or balked, so they did it themselves. Tell us who. Jonah's mouth opened and closed. His eyes flicked toward Celeste, then Quill, then Rita. Finally, his shoulders dropped. I didn't mean for it to go this far, he said quietly. I thought it was a joke, a marketing stunt. Whose? Wolfe demanded. Greylion's. Parrish sent the first note. He said it was all part of a literary performance. He promised exposure, money. He said Miss Rowan would thank me later. Celeste stood, her composure shattering. You gave them my manuscript. I gave them a copy, Jonah said miserably. Just the file. I didn't think they'd actually publish it. Wolfe closed his eyes again, but the sound that came from him wasn't satisfaction. It was disgust. Idiocy is a more reliable weapon than malice, he said softly. Yet both wound alike. Jonah sagged in his chair. Celeste's face was colorless. Wolfe lifted a finger toward me. Archie, inform Saul that the identity of Parrish requires immediate verification. I suspect we shall find another name behind it. Behind Parrish, I said. You mean... I mean, Wolfe said, that the witch's smile is not yet hers alone. Jonah's confession hit the room like a sudden draft, sharp enough to make everyone sit a little stiffer. Celeste stood frozen, her yellow sleeve trembling near her wrist, while Quill looked like he was trying to decide whether outrage or damage control would be more profitable. Wolfe didn't move at all, not even to blink. When he finally spoke, his tone was soft, dangerously soft. Mr. Quill, he said, I presume your agency's contracts include confidentiality clauses. Quill swallowed. Naturally. And if this boy breached one, he's finished. I'll see to that. You will do nothing, Wolfe said curtly. Your indignation is ornamental. It contributes nothing to the problem. I leaned against the globe stand, watching Jonah collapse into guilt like a folding chair. He looked pale, the kind of pale that comes from realizing you're no longer a pawn, but evidence. Celeste turned toward him. You gave them everything. My notes, my drafts, the details I told you in confidence. Everything? Jonah nodded, barely audible. I didn't think they'd actually use it. Parrish said it was just conceptual. An art project, something about reality and fiction blending. I swear I thought it was harmless. Reality and fiction, Wolfe murmured. An artifice masquerading as intellect. The refuge of cowards. He shifted his gaze to me. Archie, call Saul. He is likely still awake. Instruct him to verify whether J.E. Parrish is a legal entity or a mask. I went to the phone. Saul answered on the second ring. I gave him the short version and he grunted in acknowledgement. Already digging. Greylion Press is a hollow shell, he said. Registered 6 months ago to a holding company called Witchlight Partners. Guess who's behind that? Don't guess, I said. He didn't make me wait. Rita Latham, she incorporated it. When I hung up and repeated that last line, the room took a collective breath. Wolfe's eyes turned to Rita. Madame, do you wish to confirm or refute that? Her chin lifted slightly. There's nothing to refute. I started Witchlight as a side venture. Experimental publishing. We were acquiring avant-garde material. Satirical. Immersive. Greylion was supposed to be a brand extension. I didn't think it necessary to disclose every project to my employer. Celeste's voice sliced in. You stole from me and called it experimental? Rita's composure was still intact, but it had hairline cracks. You misunderstand. Parrish, an associate I hired, found Jonah. He proposed using your manuscript as a prototype. The plan was to rewrite it, anonymize it, make it something new. It wasn't theft. It was adaptation, intellectual evolution. Wolfe exhaled through his nose, an unmistakable sign of disdain. Evolution implies improvement. Yours is parasitism, with a thesaurus. Rita's lips parted, but whatever defense she'd prepared died on the vine. Wolfe gestured toward Jonah. You were paid. Jonah nodded weakly. 500 in cash. Cheap treachery, Wolfe said. Miss Rowan, did you authorize anyone to sell, share, or adapt your work? Of course not. Then the theft stands. Quill jumped in. If Witchlight's a registered entity, this becomes civil and criminal. We can file an injunction, stop publication, demand damages. Wolfe shot him a look that silenced him quicker than a judge's gavel. Mr. Quill, the law will have its share, but I'm concerned with reparation of a different kind. The restoration of order within my walls. He pressed the bell for Fritz. Bring coffee, he said, then looked at the room. I detest melodrama, but I also detest deceit more. The presence of this parish, whether corporeal or not, is a provocation. He or she has entered my house unbidden and observed my habits. That is intolerable. Rita shifted uneasily. I've never been here before, Mr. Wolfe. I didn't— No, Wolfe said sharply. You did not, but your associate did. He, or his surrogate, walked through this hallway, left dust, and moved an object on my desk. Such behavior is never accidental. It was meant to announce possession, ownership of the narrative, so to speak. Celeste stared at him. You think he's taunting you personally? I know it, Wolfe said. The saffron, the phrasing, the intrusion, it is theater. Someone fancies himself an author, not of books, but of events. He has written this drama as if it were his own. I'd seen Wolfe annoyed, furious, and even amused, but never this still. It was the stillness of someone deciding where to aim before pulling a trigger he didn't need to touch. Jonah, Wolfe continued, you will remain here under Mr. Goodwin's supervision until further notice. I will not have you vanish into the city like an ill-edited footnote. Jonah sank lower. Quill started to object, but Wolfe turned on him. You, sir, will accompany Miss Rowan home and ensure her safety. Someone has already crossed my threshold. I will not risk hers. Miss Latham— Rita met his gaze, chin high again, defiance flickering like a pilot light. You will remain available for Mr. Panzer's questions when he returns. I advise candor. He prefers efficiency. She nodded once, tightly. When they'd gone, Celeste and Quill to her car, Rita ushered by me to the foyer. Jonah left slumped in a chair. Wolfe finally relaxed, or what passes for it. The notebook sat open on the desk, the first page still taunting us. He regarded it like a chessboard that had dared to rearrange itself overnight. Archie, he said, our unseen dramatist believes he has authored a story. He expects me to play the detective while he remains the omniscient narrator. I shall reverse the roles. You mean smoke him out? I mean correct his syntax, Wolfe said dryly. He has written himself into the plot, and now we will edit him out. He stood, an event that could have been recorded by seismographs, and crossed to the window. Outside, the streetlights threw long stripes of shadow across the sill. Tomorrow, he said, Mr. Panzer will bring me Parrish's origin. You, Archie, will visit the offices of Witchlight. Learn how many keys open their doors and whose hand pays their rent. I nodded. And if I find the witch herself? Do not exorcise her, Wolfe said without turning. Merely observe how she smiles. The next morning started grey and tight, like the city had pulled on a headache. I left the brownstone at 9 sharp, which is early by Wolfe's standards and uncivilized by mine. He'd already barricaded himself in the plant rooms, leaving instructions precise enough to qualify as scripture. Visit Witchlight, observe, inquire, provoke only if useful. That was Nero Wolfe for get into trouble, but the right kind. Witchlight Partners had its office in a converted warehouse in Soho, the kind of space where sunlight costs extra and everyone pretends concrete floors are a lifestyle. The brass plaque on the door was new, too new. It still smelled like polish. Inside, the place had been dressed to impress investors. Abstract art, sleek furniture, and the faint hum of people trying to look busier than they were. A receptionist with espresso-colored hair and the world's smallest patience gave me the kind of smile that should come with a disclaimer. "Witchlight Partners," she said. "Appointment. Archie Goodwin, representing Nero Wolfe. We're looking into a recent collaboration with one of your subsidiaries, Grey Lion Press." Her eyes flickered. She had the kind of trained neutrality you see in court stenographers and professional liars. "I'm afraid Mr. Parrish isn't available today." "Maybe not," I said, "but his ghost's been making house calls, and my boss doesn't like unannounced visitors. How about someone who works under him?" She hesitated a second too long. Then, one moment, she disappeared into an inner office, her heels clicking like punctuation. I used the minute to scan the surroundings. A few desks, one printer, 3 laptops. On a side table sat a bowl of wrapped candies, saffron-colored wrappers. The scent hit me faintly, same as the envelope Wolfe had handled. I pocketed one before the receptionist returned. She didn't notice. "Mr. Parrish isn't in," she said again, but this time she looked slightly nervous. "However, Miss Latham left instructions that if you or Mr. Wolfe inquired, you should be directed to her office downtown." "Generous of her," I said. "Where's Parrish actually work?" I wouldn't know. She was lying, but I didn't push. Wolfe had warned me that pressing for answers too early only made people practice their lies. Better to collect them first, then sort them later. I thanked her, left, and circled the block. Witchlight's name appeared on the mailbox list beside a law firm and a design agency, but no suite number for Grey Lion Press. I jotted that down and called Saul from a payphone. "Grey Lion doesn't exist here," I said. "Just Witchlight and a girl with nerves made of glass." "Figures," Saul said. I pulled more on Parrish. "The guy's a phantom. No tax record, no license, no phone under that name. But there's a Jeremy Latham, Rita's brother. Used to dabble in literary startups. Vanished after some lawsuit 2 years ago." "That's our Parrish," I said. "Could be. Want me to dig up an address?" "Yeah, Wolfe will want it before lunch. And Saul, keep it quiet. Whoever's running this show already likes playing trespasser." When I got back, Fritz was in a mood. "Your shoes, Archie. Dust again." I offered to dust the hallway myself, but that didn't help. The brown stone was twitching under Wolfe's skin. He could feel disorder the way some men feel a draft. He was in the office when I came in, deep in one of those silences that you could hear thinking. He didn't ask for my report. He just gestured toward the chair and said, "Tell it." I did. Every detail, from the saffron candies to the phantom name. He listened without interrupting, eyes closed, fingertips together. When I mentioned Rita's brother, the corner of his mouth twitched. "An interesting symmetry," he said. "The thief and the editor, linked by blood. How congenial." "Saul's tracking him now," I said. "You think he's the one who came into the house?" "I think he considers himself an author, and authors are proprietary creatures. It would amuse him to visit the stage he has built. He's got gall, I'll give him that." "Gall," Wolfe said, "is the lubricant of fraud." He lifted the candy I'd brought and sniffed it. "Saffron oil. Expensive affectation. I suspect Witchlight uses it as a brand motif. Their scent like a signature." "That explains the envelope," I said. "Indeed. It also explains their arrogance. Miss Latham is clever, but she is not the witch. She is an instrument. The smile belongs elsewhere." Meaning Jeremy. Meaning whoever composes the performance. Perhaps her brother. Perhaps not. He opened his eyes and fixed me with the look that means he's rearranging the universe one deduction at a time. "You will accompany Saul when he locates this man. Do not approach him yet. Observe, record, and report. I wish to see how he moves when he believes he is unwatched. Suppose he recognizes me. Then charm him. You are at least moderately gifted in that regard." That was as close as Wolfe gets to flattery. I took it and went upstairs to fetch my coat. Saul called an hour later with an address on East 73rd. A small brownstone, of course, because irony never misses an opportunity. We met there just after 3. The building's mailbox listed Parish J on the 2nd floor. Through the window blinds we could see movement. A tall man pacing, a desk cluttered with papers, and, unless my eyes were wrong, the spiral notebook from our office lying open under a desk lamp. Saul glanced at me. "You thinking what I'm thinking?" "Probably," I said. "That the guy's rewriting the ending." We waited until he left at 4, carrying a slim envelope and wearing the look of someone about to enjoy their own genius. Saul tailed him discreetly while I went up to the door. The lock wasn't hard. Inside, the air smelled faintly of saffron and fresh ink. The desk was littered with drafts, typed pages labeled "The Witch's Smile," final version. The first line read, "He thought he was the hunter, but the story had already chosen its prey." I didn't like that sentence, not one bit. It felt too close to home. When I got back to the brownstone and handed Wolfe a copy of that page, he read it once, then twice. His expression didn't change, but his voice did. "Archie," he said, "we are no longer dealing with theft. We are dealing with authorship." He means to conclude his fiction, in fact. "You think he's coming back here?" Wolfe looked up, his eyes colder than the marble bust of Caesar behind him. "No," he said. "He has already returned. And this time, Archie, he intends to write us into his ending." Wolfe had said it with that inflection that means he wasn't guessing. He was simply stating a truth the universe hadn't caught up with yet. I didn't argue, because when Wolfe used that tone, arguing was like debating a glacier about its direction. Still, I didn't like the sound of "already returned." That night the brownstone felt wrong. Too still, too symmetrical. Fritz was quieter than usual, and even the orchids seemed to be holding their breath. Wolfe remained downstairs longer than his habit, reading through Celeste's drafts and notes as if the paper itself might betray a whisper. The spiral notebook sat on the corner of his desk, untouched but alive in the way certain objects are when they've been written about too much. Around 9, the phone rang. Fritz answered, then handed it to me with a frown. "A man," he said. "No name. He says it's urgent." "Goodwin," I said into the receiver. The voice that came through was low, smooth, deliberate. "You're wasting your employer's time," it said. "The story ends tonight." "Fine," I said. "Send an advance copy." A pause. Then, "I already have." The line clicked dead. I went to Wolfe. He didn't even lift an eyebrow when I told him. He only said, "The envelope by the door. Bring it." It hadn't been there earlier. A small square package wrapped in brown paper sat just inside the vestibule. Fritz swore he hadn't heard the bell, and I believed him. Nothing short of artillery would distract Fritz from the dinner service. The package was light. No return address. I slit it open. Inside was a single sheet of thick white stock, neatly typed, Chapter 12. The Confession at the Brownstone. Underneath, a paragraph. The detective believed himself safe within his order. He did not see that the final draft was written elsewhere, by hands closer than he thought. I handed it over. Wolfe read it once, twice, and set it down with surgical care. "Archie," he said, "we are in the 12th chapter." "Yeah," I said, "and we don't even know who's writing the thing." He pressed the buzzer for Fritz. "Secure the doors, double the bolts. No one leaves, no one enters. If I am to be a character, I will at least choose my stage." Fritz nodded and disappeared. Wolfe turned to me. "Saul is late. He's tailing our man. Maybe he's got something. Or perhaps something has him." That possibility didn't sit well. I called Saul's number twice. No answer. Wolfe closed his eyes, which didn't help my nerves. He will call when he can. he said. Meanwhile, we will entertain our author. Meaning what? Meaning we bait him. He dictated a note, short and clean, addressed to J.E. Parrish, stating that Wolfe had discovered the missing chapter and inviting him to the brownstone at 11 to reclaim what was his. He told me to deliver it personally to Witchlight's mailbox. I didn't ask how he knew it would find the right hands. Wolfe's instincts about bait were infallible. By the time I got back, the brownstone looked like a sealed vault. Fritz had locked the basement door and dimmed the front lights. Wolfe sat in his chair, massive and still, the spiral notebook open before him. Archie, he said, note the detail. This intruder is no vandal. He is meticulous. He writes drafts in triplicate. Tonight he will come to edit. The clock crawled toward 11. Outside, the street was empty except for a few stubborn leaves scraping along the pavement. Then came the sound, barely there, a soft, metallic click from the hallway, the kind of sound you feel rather than hear. I moved toward the vestibule, gun in hand, but Wolfe stopped me with a look. No, he said quietly. He expects pursuit. Let him enter. The latch turned and the door swung open without a creak. A figure stepped in, tall, slim, coat collar raised. For a moment, the shadows did all the work, but then the face tilted toward the light. Rita Latham. She closed the door behind her like someone shutting a book. Mr. Wolfe, she said calmly, I told you the witch doesn't repeat herself. Wolfe didn't stand. And yet here you are, Miss Latham, repeating perfectly. Her lips curved, and for the first time I saw what Celeste had meant. The smile, calculated and strange, the kind that belongs to someone who's already written the next line of your dialogue. You've been reading the wrong ending, she said. Jeremy wasn't the writer. He was my first draft. I moved a step closer. You're telling us you stole her work, created an alias, and decided to make Wolfe part of the sequel. She turned to me with that same unnerving calm. Not a sequel, a resolution. Stories need closure, Mr. Goodwin. I gave Celeste her story back. Now I'm giving you yours. She reached into her coat and I raised my gun, but she only pulled out a manuscript, a thick sheaf of paper bound with string. She set it on Wolfe's desk. The witch's smile, she said. Final version. The last page ends here in this room. You, him, me. Wolfe regarded her as though she were an experiment that had just confirmed his worst hypothesis. You killed your own brother? He asked softly. She blinked, once, the first crack in the porcelain. He wanted credit. He wasn't careful. Fritz appeared in the doorway then, pale but steady. Inspector Kramer is on the phone, he said. He says Saul Panzer found a man dead near 73rd Street. Name of Jeremy Latham. No one spoke. Wolfe's voice, when it came, was colder than the air outside. Thank you, Fritz. Tell Mr. Kramer he may come at once. And tell him, he added, eyes fixed on Rita, to bring a warrant for a woman who mistook authorship for absolution. She didn't fight, didn't flinch, just smiled again. Thin, knowing, final. When Kramer arrived 20 minutes later and took her away, the brownstone exhaled. Wolfe stayed silent until the front door shut, then looked at me. Archie, he said, human vanity is the only witchcraft that never fails, and every witch, he added, glancing at the notebook, eventually writes her own confession. He reached for his beer, took a long swallow, and closed his eyes. The orchids upstairs resumed their quiet breathing. Dinner was cold, but order, our sacred order, was restored. By the next morning, the brownstone was quieter than usual, the kind of quiet that hangs around after too much has been said. Fritz moved through the kitchen as though mourning decency itself, and the air smelled faintly of coffee, paper, and something like relief. Wolfe had not gone to the plant rooms. He sat in his chair, robe and vest impeccable, the way a general sits after winning a war he didn't want. The spiral notebook still occupied its corner of the desk, closed now, a sealed relic of lunacy and ego. I came in with the Morning Gazette, which featured Rita Latham's arrest beneath a headline that used the word sensational. She'd confessed to killing her brother, though the details were still under wraps. Kramer had done his job for once without shouting, which meant he knew Wolfe had done his. "Paper," I said, dropping it in front of him. "You're famous again, or infamous, depending on which side of Kramer's cigar you sit." He didn't look down. "Infamy is a distraction, Archie. It requires applause." I sank into my chair. "You could at least admit you're satisfied. She's in custody, her company's collapsing, and the witch's smile has faded." His eyes opened halfway. "Has it?" That was all he said for a good 30 seconds, which meant he wasn't done. I waited because experience had taught me that interrupting Wolfe mid-thought was like shaking a tree to make the fruit ripen faster. "She constructed an identity," he said finally. "Then a mythology. When Jeremy became inconvenient, she edited him out. Literally. Every act was authored, not lived. Her confession itself will be a performance. She will make her guilt art. She'll make it prison art," I said. "End of story." He gave me a look, faintly pitying. "You are mercifully pragmatic. But evil such as hers does not end. It metastasizes into vanity. She believed authorship conferred dominion. She was mistaken. Authorship demands responsibility, and that she never learned." He leaned back, eyes closing again. I poured myself coffee and let the steam take some of the chill out of the air. "She had nerve, I'll give her that," I said. "To come here, knowing Kramer was on her trail. She thought she could write her ending in your office." Wolfe's lips twitched. She thought the setting would ennoble her. As if proximity to intellect might grant absolution, a common delusion. I glanced at the notebook. "You keeping that?" "For now." "What about Celeste?" He grunted, which meant the topic wasn't yet settled. "She will require time. Betrayal is a wound that resists the balm of justice." I knew what he meant. I'd spoken with Celeste on the phone earlier. She sounded stunned, hollowed out, like someone who'd stepped off stage and found the audience gone. She was grateful, of course, but gratitude is a small thing against the size of betrayal. Around noon, the doorbell rang. Fritz announced Celeste before Wolfe could even sigh. She entered without the yellow suit this time. Dark blue now, sober, eyes raw from sleeplessness. Wolfe inclined his head but didn't rise. "Miss Rowan," he said, "I regret the intrusion upon your life." "You restored it," she said quietly. "That's more than I expected from anyone." Wolfe gestured to the chair opposite him. She sat, hands folded neatly in her lap. I stayed by the desk, in case he needed translation from human emotion to Wolfe speak. "I came," she said, "because I wanted to see it one more time. The notebook. I don't know why. Maybe because it's proof she existed. My thief. My shadow." Wolfe nodded once. "It is a monument to folly, not creation. Still, you may look." He slid the notebook toward her. She touched it gingerly, as though it might still be alive. Her voice was softer when she spoke again. She thought she was writing her own redemption. "All sinners do," Wolfe said. "It is what makes sin tolerable." Celeste looked up. "What will happen to her manuscript?" "Kramer has it," I said. "It'll go into evidence, then dust. I doubt anyone will publish it." "She already published it," Celeste murmured. "In her way." Wolfe shifted his weight. "You will write again." She smiled faintly. "You sound sure." "I am. Those who survive the theft of their work often discover a clearer voice. Suffering purges ornament." "I'll take that as encouragement," she said, rising. "Thank you, Mr. Wolfe, and you, Archie." When she left, the quiet came back. thicker this time. Fritz brought lunch, and Wolfe ignored it for a while, then surrendered to it in stages, beginning with the beer. I waited until he was halfway through before I spoke. "So that's it? Case closed?" He set down the glass. "For the police, yes. For me, it is merely concluded." "What's the difference?" "Closure is a human conceit," he said. "Conclusion is logical. Closure implies comfort, which is a rarity I do not pursue." I grinned. "Comfort's overrated anyway." He gave me a look that managed to be both weary and amused. "On that, Mr. Goodwin, we are in unlikely accord." He went back to his meal, and for a while, the only sounds were the small domestic ones that mean life at the brownstone has resumed its rhythm, the rustle of pages, the faint hiss of Fritz's handiwork in the kitchen, the steady tick of the office clock. But as I sat there, the image of Rita Latham's smile kept creeping back. Maybe Wolfe was right. Vanity doesn't die. It just changes publishers. She'd turned people into characters and stories into weapons. Wolfe had turned her confession into a sentence. When he finally spoke again, it was almost to himself. "Archie, note this. The only crime more insidious than theft is presumption. To imagine one's intellect above consequence. There lies the true corruption." He leaned back, closing his eyes. "I shall have the orchids tended now. They, at least, obey their natures." I nodded, gathered my hat, and left him to his solitude. Outside, the city went about its usual noisy edits. Taxi horns, shouts, footsteps. Life always rewriting itself, and somewhere behind me, in that house of order and words, Nero Wolfe sat alone with his thoughts, correcting the punctuation of human folly, one case at a time. That evening, the brownstone exhaled itself back into rhythm, the way it always does once Wolfe has restored his world to its proper geometry. But even geometry can have hairline cracks. Wolfe might have considered the case concluded, but I've known him long enough to recognize when he's still thinking. He'd finished dinner, lamb with thyme and Fritz's idea of a modest dessert, which is to say, immodestly good, and was pretending to read Le Monde. The paper might as well have been blank. He hadn't turned a page in 15 minutes. I was in my chair, filing notes, when the phone rang. Wolfe looked at it as though it had insulted him personally. I picked up. "Goodwin." A voice I didn't know spoke, steady but low. "Mr. Wolfe should reconsider his definition of conclusion," it said. "He's left something unwritten." "Yeah?" I said. "He's sensitive about his drafts." "Who is this?" But the line went dead before I could finish. I held the receiver a second longer, listening to the dial tone like it might confess. Then I looked at Wolfe. He was watching me, which meant he'd heard the tone of the voice, even if not the words. "Well?" he asked. "Someone with a flair for drama," I said. "Says you left something unwritten." "No name." His eyes half closed. "Male or female?" "Male. Calm, polite, the kind of calm that's meant to be noticed." "Describe the timbre." "Low, maybe mid-30s. Educated. No accent I could hang a hat on." He nodded once. "Jeremy Latham." I blinked. "Jeremy? He's dead. You saw the report." "I saw a report," Wolfe said. "What I did not see was a body." That got my attention. "Kramer identified him." "Kramer identified what was left after fire and inconvenience," Wolfe said mildly. "But the description, height, weight, the absence of dental verification, invites skepticism. And you, Archie, have too lively a suspicion to rest on bureaucracy." I leaned back. "So you think Jeremy's still breathing? Why?" "He had no reason to fake his death. His sister was behind the whole thing." "Not entirely," Wolfe said. "Rita was the visible mind, but the conceit, the architecture of the deception, that was his craft. She performed, he authored. You noticed her language at our confrontation. First draft. She may not have known he survived." I whistled low. So the witch's smile isn't quite erased. He nodded. Indeed. And now it grins from beyond its presumed grave. He didn't say more, but the office felt heavier, like the air was listening. I called Kramer's office. He was out, so I left a message. Possible misidentification of Jeremy Latham's remains. Wolfe wants confirmation. Kramer would love that, the way a bull loves embroidery. By midnight, the house was sealed again. Wolfe had retired upstairs, but I couldn't shake the voice on the phone. Calm, precise, deliberate, like a man who believed himself smarter than the people he was addressing. I'd met that type. The city bred them by the dozen, but this one had a specific chill. He knew Wolfe's number, our timing, our tone. Around 1, the doorbell rang. I didn't open it immediately. No one rings our bell at that hour unless they're lost, drunk, or planning something regrettable. I moved quietly down the hall, checked the peephole, and saw nothing, just darkness and rain. But when I cracked the door, an envelope waited on the mat, dry despite the drizzle. The handwriting was the same tight, deliberate script as before. No return address. Inside, a single sheet. You have edited the wrong chapter. That was all. No name, no signature, just that sentence, centered neatly on the page. I took it to Wolfe, who had apparently given up on sleep. He was in his pajamas, robe belted, looking as though irritation had been added to his diet. He read the note once, then set it beside the previous ones, aligning the corners with surgical care. The voice fits the pen, he said. Jeremy is alive. You're sure? Certain enough to be annoyed. He tapped the edge of the paper. Observe the phrasing. Edited, not investigated, not accused. A writer's vanity, unrepentant. He regards his sister's confession as revision, not betrayal. I poured coffee because something told me this wasn't going to end before sunrise. So he staged his own death, let her take the fall, and now he's rewriting again. Precisely. He's orchestrating a postscript. Why call me? Because you answer the phone, Wolfe said dryly. He wishes to engage, to prod, to remind me that he still dictates the narrative. He leaned back, fingers steepled. This will not do. He closed his eyes, thinking, and for once the sound of the rain filled the silence. When he opened them again, the decision was there. Archie, you will go to the Latham property tomorrow, Jeremy's old apartment. See if anything suggests preparation, not departure. Alone? For now. If he intended harm, he would not warn me. He seeks recognition. Or an audience, I said. Both, likely. Artists crave witnesses. The next day dawned as colorless as the night had been. I made my way to the apartment, a narrow place on East 73rd, the same block where Saul had found the supposed body. The door was sealed with police tape, but a modest investment in subtlety got me through. Inside, the air was thick with stale smoke and something faintly chemical. The furniture had been cleared, but the walls told stories, scrapings where frames had hung, circles of cleaner paint like ghosts of art. On the desk sat a small metal recorder, unplugged but blinking faintly. I pressed play. Jeremy's voice, unmistakable. They'll believe what they read. They always do, and if Wolfe reads this, tell him, some stories aren't solved, they're rewritten. The tape clicked off. Nothing else. When I got back, Wolfe was waiting. I handed him the recorder. He listened once, face unmoving, then turned it off. So, I said, he's alive, taunting you. Not taunting, Wolfe murmured. Inviting. Inviting what? Collaboration. He looked up at me, eyes glinting under the lamp. Archie, he intends another draft, and this one, he means us, to write with him. When a man like Nero Wolfe says someone intends a collaboration, it's not a metaphor, it's a sentence. And when he says it in that tone, soft, deliberate, with the vowels clipped like knife edges, you know the story hasn't ended. It's simply changing narrators. The next morning began without the usual peace offering from Fritz's kitchen. Wolfe was awake early, which meant before 10, and the office had that strange vibration it gets when he's turning a problem over in his head and the problem's beginning to turn back. He had the recorder on his desk, the new note beside it, and a map of East 73rd folded open to the block where Saul had found on what Kramer's boys still swore was Jeremy Latham's corpse. I came in with coffee. "The witch's smile again?" I asked. He nodded without looking up. "Jeremy Latham seeks affirmation. A man who fakes his death and authors his own obituary is incapable of silence. He will surface, because he must be read." "Then we let him publish himself," I said. "Give Kramer the tape and let the police run the presses." "That would be too merciful," Wolfe replied. "Kramer will bungle the subtleties. Jeremy's vanity is his lever. We shall use it." He outlined it slowly, as he always does when the plan's dangerous but dignified. I was to place an announcement in the Gazette under Wolfe's name. "To the author of The Witch's Smile. Your final manuscript awaits its editor. Tonight at 9, the Brownstone." A message only a narcissist would believe was meant for him. Fritz nearly fainted when I told him we were expecting another guest after dark. But by 8:30 the house was set. Bolts loosened, lights dimmed, curtains open just enough to show the silhouette of Wolfe in his chair. It looked staged, and that was the point. At 9:10, the doorbell rang. I was waiting behind the alcove curtain with a hand near my gun, but no real intention to use it. Wolfe didn't move, didn't even turn his head, as the latch turned and the door opened. Jeremy Latham stepped inside. He looked smaller than I remembered from the apartment window, a gaunt man with the vanity of someone who had once been handsome and believed he still was. His clothes were dark, tailored but rumpled, and his smile, the witch's smile, now wholly his, curved just enough to suggest amusement rather than pleasure. "Mr. Wolfe," he said, voice the same calm that had whispered through the phone. "You're punctual. That's admirable in a character." "I'm not a character," Wolfe said. "I'm an editor." "Sit." Jeremy's gaze flicked toward me once, measuring the angle of my shadow, then back to Wolfe. "You're bolder than I expected," he said. "Most men would have called the police." "I am not most men." Jeremy smiled again and sat opposite him, crossing his legs. "I assume this is where you tell me you've solved the riddle?" "There is no riddle," Wolfe said evenly. "Only a question of authorship. You and your sister co-wrote a crime and confused invention for insight. She is dead by your design, and now you intend to write your immortality by embroiling me in your fiction. I refuse the role." Jeremy laughed softly. "Refuse it? You already play it. You've restored the stolen manuscript, delivered justice, and faced the ghost. You're the perfect protagonist, complete with foil." His eyes shifted toward me. "Every detective needs his Watson." I stepped out of the shadow. "You'll be needing a lawyer more than an audience." "Ah," Jeremy said, rising. "But lawyers end stories. I write them." He reached into his coat, and for a half-second, I thought this story was about to end with headlines. But he drew out not a gun, just a small black notebook, its first page open and waiting. "The real ending, Mr. Wolfe," he said, "is the one no one sees." The detective realizes that solving the mystery didn't stop the author. It completed him. Wolfe didn't flinch. "You overestimate drama, Mr. Latham. The only completion awaiting you is legal." The door opened behind him. Two uniformed men stepped in quietly. Kramer's best, moving with the kind of precision that says Saul Panzer had earned his fee. Jeremy froze, the smile evaporating. "I told you," Wolfe said mildly, "your vanity would deliver you. You answered the ad because you couldn't resist an audience. You came to perform, and in doing so, you have confessed." Kramer followed them in, cigar in his mouth, scowl fully loaded. "You should try the stage, Latham," he growled. "Plenty of room for bad actors." Jeremy looked at Wolfe, almost pitying. "You'll make a fine closing chapter," he said quietly, as the handcuffs clicked shut. "But remember, every story ends with silence, and even editors die unread." They took him away. The front door closed, leaving the brownstone wrapped in its familiar stillness. Wolfe exhaled slowly, then looked at me. "Archie," he said, "fetch me beer." When I brought it, he raised the glass and stared at it as though examining the reflection of the whole sordid affair. "What a futile creature man is," he said. "He steals truth, invents it, and calls the theft creation. He kills his sister to preserve a metaphor. Pfui." I let him have his philosophy. At least he's finished now. Wolfe's lips curved faintly. "No one finishes, Archie. They are merely footnoted by consequence." He closed his eyes, the faint hum of orchids upstairs reasserting the house's pulse. I sat back, listening to the clock tick us into order again. Outside, the rain had stopped, and the city's noise began its next paragraph. Wolfe opened his eyes once more, and said almost gently, "The witch's smile, Archie. It was not hers or his. It was humanity's reflection, pleased with its own deceit." He drank, leaned back, and the brownstone, that citadel of reason, sealed itself against the world once more. Dinner waited. The case was done. And for a brief, impossible moment, even the city outside seemed to understand punctuation.